This room is packed and this is so beautiful. Welcome you all. Thank you for being here and thank you for you two to be here to our panel on security policy and human rights, scope for action in times of war and crisis. Maria Ressa from Manila and Jens Stoltenberg. And Jens Stoltenberg from Oslo.
Thank you.
I don't know if we're really going to take questions from the audience at the end, because this will probably take forever then. Maria, tell me, I'm introducing you two now, but answer please this question. Did you still have to ask for permission to travel here today with the Philippine authorities?
Yes, but I was invited by the Philippines. So, but yes, I still have to ask permission from the Supreme Court, which the Supreme Court gave. And it was interesting to ask the Philippine delegation to write me a letter so I could come. Thank you.
Because there were, or there probably still are, some of them, 11 arrest warrants against you because of your reporting on Rodrigo Duterte's extrajudicial killings in his war on drugs, about disinformation and bots to become president of the Philippines in 2016. And you've done that as executive editor, as co-founder, and you still are today CEO of the online news site Rappler.com. This received many awards, as you yourself were awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021. And you wrote a book, which is called How to Stand Up to a Dictator, published in Germany by Bastei Lübbe. And in this book, you write that you love time zones and time differences because they allow you to pack your days even fuller. So thank you for being here today.
No. Of the 11 arrest warrants that I got, right?
How many are still?
11 criminal. I have one left.
Ah!
Right? So one left. It took almost a decade, but we got one left.
Jens Stoltenberg, you've been Prime Minister of Norway twice. The longer was between 2005 and 2013. You were General Secretary of NATO from 2014 to 2024. You've written a book about it. Pa min vakt allede NATO I krigstid.
Yes.
Is that pronounced right?
That's perfect in Norwegian. Yeah.
Okay, this is. I'm happy because my Norwegian is actually not non-existent. Auf meinem Posten in Kriegszeiten an der Spitze der NATO, published just this year by Siedler, and we want to mention the excellent work of the translator because he's from Frankfurt, Ulrich Sonnenberg. And in Munich, at the Munich Security Conference, they're waiting for you because you're becoming the new head, but they must be patient because since February you're Minister of Finances in Norway.
Oh.
My name is Sebastian Puschner. I work for the German online and print media outlet Der Freitag, which is Friday, so that fits all on this Friday here. Let's start. Maria, I want to start with you and ask you, at a time when most people in the US and in Europe probably thought of Donald Trump as American president as a good joke by The Simpsons, you saw it all coming. Flood of lies online, influencing people in elections, social media as an authoritarian tool rather than a bottom-up democratization tool. Take us back to that time. When and how did you realize the nature of this and the scale of this?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, maraming salamat po sa mga Pinoy na nandito. Yo! It's so good to see so many friends. In 2016, in the campaign of Rodrigo Duterte, there was a Facebook page that targeted a student in one of the campaign rallies and threatened him with death because he asked a question about the extrajudicial killings that Duterte was accused of in Davao City. And at that point, it was still the campaign, so it was around April, the end near May, and so we wrote Facebook. I wrote the campaign. It took Facebook maybe a few hours at that point to take it down because it was threatening death, right? And the family was doxxed. So that was the first instance. But then I felt the full fury. Look, Filipinos know this better than anyone else. For 6 years in a row until 2021, Filipinos spent the most time online and on social media globally. Facebook was literally our internet. And so we lived through it. And at some point in the book, I talk about 90 hate messages per hour. And so it's a deluge. And if this hasn't happened to you yet, you in the global north, this is free speech used to pound free speech to silence. And so when I saw that, that's when I realized, oh my God, this is going to fundamentally change. My company was under attack. Patricia Evangelista, our reporter who worked on the drug war, also has a book. She's here as well. But I had a very young team, right? Our median age was 23 years old, and we were 63% women. And women in the Philippines in 2017 were attacked online at least 10 times more than men. So here's the thing. The Philippines went from hell to purgatory. It's better, but I feel like the West and Germany, I worry about you. I feel like you're going to go through what we went through. So be careful.
Jens, I'll turn to you just now, but let me add the question. You warned the West, you warned Facebook, you said like what is happening to us will soon and fast happen to you.
Yeah.
Why do you think that wasn't listened to? Is that because the Philippines were a laboratory for tech firms from all over because of the weak regulation and the high penetration of internet and social media? Was it because it was something happening in the global south that doesn't bother us? Why do you think there was this early ignorance?
I think even until today, is there anyone here that doesn't have one of these? Right? Even until today, until you're personally attacked, or your child, or your friend, you don't realize this, and then you just begin to realize that we're being polarized, that politics has become a gladiator's battle to the death, that real communication has become impossible in the virtual world. So look, I now teach at Columbia University, and one of the things that's fascinating to me is the idea of American exceptionalism. It's happening out there. It won't happen here. January 6th, brought it home. It brought Silicon Valley sins to America. And yet, there was a Trump 2.0, right? And so I think today, what you're seeing, look, I hate to say, but like right now, the paperback version in America is number 3 on the New York Times bestseller list. I think Americans are trying to learn from our experience in the Philippines, and Germany. Sorry, I go back to Germany. You have to hold the line because you're not out of the woods.
Jens, we mentioned Donald Trump. He's now in his second term as US president. In your book, you describe very authentic the phone calls and meetings with him in his first term. And at the end, you come to the conclusion that actually this term was good for NATO, on that actually he got what he wanted, burden sharing and so on. So would you say, or how would you describe the Trump method? And would you really say that probably this method is quite successful and effective?
I will answer that question in a moment, but let me first say that it's a great privilege to be here at this book fair, but also to be here together with Maria Ressa, because she is such a strong and impressive voice for freedom, for democracy, for open societies. And I'm from Oslo. She came to Oslo to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. And for me to be at the stage with the Nobel Peace Laureate is... And there is actually a link, because the core values of NATO is to defend freedom, is to defend democracy against external threats. And today we see external threats go against our democratic open societies. Then we also see internal threats. We all have to fight them. NATO is not that institution because we look outwards, but I think that this conversation demonstrates that we need to address both what comes from inside and what comes from outside. Then on Trump, let me add one more thing, and is that I write this book because I believe in transparency, I believe in openness, and I think that an important, big, powerful institution like NATO has to be transparent. We have to tell both about our successes, but also about our weaknesses, failure, doubt, the dilemmas, and we face many dilemmas. NATO is less streamlined, NATO is less obvious than many people believe. And therefore, I also tell as honest as possible about the discussions, the disagreements, and that's why I also tell about my discussions with President Trump. And I'm a Nordic social democrat, and of course there are differences between a conservative Republican from the United States.
Slightly?
Yeah, I believe you have to fight climate change. I believe in a rules-based order. I believe in the UN. I believe in open trade. And we disagree on all those issues. But on the specific issues regarding NATO, I was focused on how can we find some common ground, because like it or dislike it, agree or disagree, he was elected as President of the United States, the biggest NATO ally. And on two issues, we found some common ground, and they were important for NATO. First, he asked the Europeans to spend more on defense. And again, my political background is actually to spend less on defense. When I was Prime Minister and Minister of Finance in Norway back in the 1990s, we as Germany, we reduced defense spending because tensions went down, and we wanted more spending for many other things. I know that every billion you spend on defense means less billions for health, for education, for many other things. But when tensions went down, we reduced defense spending. Then the dilemma, the problem is that when tensions are going up, Russia is aggressive against our neighbors. I'm sorry to say so, but then we have to spend more on defense. And therefore, he was very strong on the need to increase defense spending. And I think that had an impact on what NATO allies did. And the other issue was gas. Until the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the majority of European countries believed that buying gas from Russia was a purely commercial issue. The reality was that it was a political issue. We were vulnerable. We were too dependent on Russian gas. And again, I disagree with him on many issues, but on defense spending and over-dependence on Russian gas, the United States, and he was right. Let me then add that that was the same message we heard from President Obama. He was actually president when NATO made the decision to invest more in defense. And that was also the same message from President Biden. So it's not he alone, but the reality is that we all together have to invest more in our security in a more dangerous world.
But he succeeded on that. He now celebrating himself for bringing peace to Gaza. And now breaking news is that he's going to meet Vladimir Putin in Budapest. So everyone probably in here is waiting for you to comment on that. What do you think? Can that be successful? Can this Trump method bring this war to an end? What do you think about this breaking news from yesterday?
Well, when I came to NATO back in 2014, one of my main messages was that we needed more dialogue with Russia. And I was criticized for being in favor of talking to the Russians. But I think we have to talk to Russia. But the dialogue has to be based on strength. Because if dialogue is a sign of weakness, then you make yourself vulnerable. But if you are strong, if you are united, then dialogue is something we need, also with an adversary like Russia. And the reason why I believe we have to talk to Russia is that we need to end the war in Ukraine. And we all want the war in Ukraine to end. But then the problem is that we know that the quickest way of ending a war is to lose a war. But that will not bring peace. That will bring occupation to Ukraine. So if you really want an end to the war in Ukraine, where Ukraine prevails as a free democratic society, where we have free press, free media, independent journalists, and not to being an authoritarian regime like we have in Moscow, then we need to provide military support to Ukraine. So again, it may be not very nice to hear, but that's the brutal reality. And so long as we support Ukraine politically, economically, and militarily, then we provide the best basis also to talk to Russians on how to end the war. As long as President Putin believes that he can win on the battlefield, the war will continue. The killing will continue. Unless the Ukrainians will give in and become part of the Moscow-controlled domain. If and when Putin realizes they will not win on the battlefield, then he will sit down and negotiate an agreement where Ukraine prevails as a free, independent country. Whether that will start in Budapest in some days, I don't know. But I'm in favor of talking to the Russians. President Zelensky is in favor of talking to the Russians. But again, the conditions has to be that Russia needs to understand that they cannot invade another country. They need to find an agreement where Ukraine prevails as an independent, free, democratic society.
Maria's got what Donald Trump won, the Nobel Peace Prize. So let's continue speaking a bit.
Wait,
more.
he called. He called Jens wanting the Nobel. Okay, go ahead.
We've been talking about Ukraine, and I've mentioned Gaza. Please tell us the Hamas attack on Israel, the Gaza war, the peace plan now. How is this perceived in the Philippines? How is the war in Ukraine perceived in the Philippines? And when it comes to disinformation and so on, which plays a huge role in wars always, does this affect your work at Rappler differently compared to domestic issues? Because I saw you got a certain section on the webpage for the Israel-Hamas war. Is that different?
Yeah. Let me pull it out a little bit broader, right? The biggest problem in our world today is impunity, right? Rule of law. The question we have to ask is, does rule of law still exist? Whether it's in the physical world, where you have Putin and Netanyahu moving and you have multilateral organizations that can't do enough, right, against the impunity. But you put that also in the virtual world, where the very same tactics that these men, and they are men, you got to deal with them, where the tactics they're using are also being used by the CEOs of the tech companies that are running our lives, right? What do I mean by that? By design, the social media platforms, and there are two major tech things that have shifted us. Social media, artificial intelligence and machine learning in social media, and generative AI, right? Neither of those technology rolled out publicly are based on facts. In fact, they violate the law in so many instances. By design, social media spreads lies faster than facts. 2018 MIT study said that lies spread 6 times faster. What does that mean, right? If lies spread faster, you cannot tell the difference between fact and fiction. So the 3 sentences I say over and over since 2016, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we don't have a shared reality. If I were to pound 1,000,000 times on social that we're in Manila, the rest of the world will think we're in Manila, even though we're here in Frankfurt. We can't solve any other problem. We can't solve climate change. We can't solve health issues, another potential pandemic, right? The mother of all battles today is information integrity. Again, the same in the virtual world as in the real world. So let me tie that together and go back. We're pumped full of toxic sludge. Online violence is real world violence, right? So what you are seeing is that every one of us on social media, and there are a lot of us, this is the first time so many of us have been reachable in one place. We can no longer decide whether I'm going to posit it this way. Data shows us that many of us may no longer have agency. As of March this year, VDEM in Sweden said that 72% of the world today is under authoritarian rule. If you don't have facts, if our biology is hacked by this, right, it changes the way we feel. We're pumped full of fear and violence. It changes the way we act. It changes the way we vote. So we're electing illiberal leaders democratically. So that's a long answer to your question of how do we look at anything if propaganda is coming at us from all sides, disinformation, right? So disinformatia, and I'm going to quote Yuri Andropov. He was the former KGB chairman, former head of the Soviet Union. He said, disinformatia is like cocaine. You take it once or twice, you're okay. But if you take it all the time, you're a changed person. You become an addict. We're addicts. So that online violence is even worse, is real world violence. So hard to, let me say, in November, Alexander Matviichik, whose group won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2022, will be in Manila. And this is part of, Ukraine seems like such a far-off battle for the Philippines. But, imagine if the battle for democracy means that you literally have to pick up a weapon. If to protect your family, you have to go out, right? We don't live like that right now, but the Ukrainians do. In Gaza, I said this at the United Nations, there are more than 270 people killed. Journalists, these are journalists alone in Gaza. Right? The number of people killed is in the tens of thousands, and we have been watching. This is the level of impunity. Having said that, depending on which social media feed you're on, in the United States, you're either anti-Semitic or anti-Islam. In the Philippines, you're either pro-Western, you're anti-Semitic, you're anti-Islam. But how do you make up your mind if you're pummeled by lies, and lies spread faster than facts? How do you govern, right? I feel sorry for governments today. Democratic leaders are standing on wood that is being eaten up by termites, and that will collapse. We're in the last 2 minutes of what I'm starting to call it an information Armageddon. Last point, right? Because I want you to get up and walk and do something here. I was trying to decide at the UN 3 weeks ago whether to call it an information Armageddon or an information apocalypse. And those are your only two choices, apocalypse or Armageddon. And because I'm an optimist, I chose Armageddon, right? Because apocalypse is done. The battle is now. The battle is here. The battle is in your pocket. I see Georgia. Georgians have been on the streets for more than 310 days in a row, through freezing weather, right? Through the heat, protesting for their democracy. So this is the moment. This is the time. Information apocalypse.
I wanna hand this question of how you govern to you, because you've been in charge in government positions as minister for many, many, many years. So how has this changed? How you cope with it? What is different than it was 20 years ago when you had already been minister?
Well, I think it has changed a lot. I have, for different reasons, followed this as a politician and as Secretary General NATO since I became Minister of Industry and Energy back in Norway in 1993, and later on the Minister of Finance. Let me just add that I am now in the very strange position that most people, they move forward in their career, and I was Prime Minister, I became Secretary General of NATO, and now I'm back as Minister of Finance, and that's a position I had 29 years ago. So I'm going backwards, but it's okay. But compared to first time I was Minister of Finance back in 1996. Then we had hardly digital newspapers. Then we had nothing like the smartphones, and of course, then we had much more time to process, to understand, to relate to the different news cycles. Now it's all over all the time, and as Maria said, in our pockets. So first of all, I think we all have a responsibility. To what we post, how we deal with the information we get. But I think we as governments, we have a responsibility to support free and independent press. I've never been more in favor of independent press and media, never been more in favor of public broadcasting, never been more in favor of laws protecting free and independent journalism. And even knowing that many of those journalists are writing critical articles about me, and my party and my government, I love them because they are actually communicating the truth, and they are critical and open. So I'm even more optimistic than you, because I believe that in the long run, truth will prevail, and that independent voices will prevail. Partly because we have people like Maria, but also people like you. We are now participating in a real event. It's not digital. We are here, and I believe also the physical books and everything, because that's less vulnerable for all the disinformation. Then, if I can add one thing from my NATO position, and also addressed in the book, is that we have the tech companies, but we also have authoritarian leaders who are using disinformation as a hybrid tool. We are not at war with Russia or any other authoritarian power now, but we are neither in peace, meaning we are in something in between. And one of the things which are a bit scary, and which is also different from the first time I joined politics, is that in the old times we had either war or peace. And actually, when countries were at war with each other, they declared war. And the ambassador went to the king or the president and said, "We are at war with you." That's not the case anymore. It's a much more blurred line. And therefore we have to be much more prepared and much more aware, and also knowing that disinformation is now part of the hostile actions that authoritarian regimes are using against us. And again, I'm coming from a political landscape that is not so different from the German political landscape. I didn't like the conservatives, and the conservatives didn't like me, and we discussed and we voted and so on. Now I feel that I have much more in common with them. Because we share the kind of fundamental idea that we have open democratic societies, that we discuss, we vote, we change government, and we have newspapers from the left and to the right, and that open society is now threatened. Partly by authoritarian regimes like Russia, but also China, using military force to try to control independent democratic society like Ukraine, but also from inside. And this double fight is more important than ever, and more important than ever to have events like this, which is a homage to the free and open societies.
But
Can I say one thing about... So one of the things, having gone to Oslo several times now, one of the interesting things is the minister was Prime Minister of Norway at a very different time, when leaders were supposed to bridge the gaps, right? We elected leaders who brought us together, not tore us apart. And one of the most interesting stories I had heard, I hope you don't mind if I say this, was part of the reason he keeps coming back, why the Norwegians keep wanting him back, was he made one decision. This is one decision that has affected every Norwegian, which was when they discovered oil, instead of privatizing the oil, the government managed it. And because of that, the sovereign fund of Norway is now over $1 trillion, but also every Norwegian now has more than 3 million kroners. And that's why they keep electing or giving him back, right? I mean, I wish, let's elect more like him. But here's the thing, our tech won't allow that now, right? Would he win if, in today's day and age, if he had to compete? If hate, lies, fear drive the electorate? And so this goes back, right? How do we get a free and open society? The first is control the tech, right? Where are the EU? I came from Brussels yesterday at the European Parliament. We need laws for public safety in the virtual world, right? You've heard there are papers that have been written, an epidemic of loneliness. There are ways that we've been torn apart. And in every country that we've studied in, we see that gender and race are the fracture lines of our countries that are split open for profit, right? So stop surveillance for profit. Demand it for our safety and the next generation's safety.
This is a good point to ask you about the stand of things today in the Philippines, because Duterte is waiting trial in The Hague. Marcos Jr. is ruling. Duterte's daughter is vice president. I believe there were anti-corruption protests in September. So how is your mission of Rappler going in the Philippines? And how is, in general, like the holding the line and fighting for future going on?
I feel safer in the Philippines. You know, it's interesting. I joke all the time that the Philippines and Brazil went from hell to purgatory, and that, you know, what we've gone through, so the anti-corruption protests, those are stories that were led by Rappler. In March, former President Duterte was arrested in the Philippines for alleged crimes against humanity. Patricia's book has 88 pages of footnotes that document it. So what do journalists have to do in times like this? Regardless of the threat, regardless of the fear, you keep doing your job. And I hope that what we get to is an open society, a transparent society where democracy can work. And the only way, I hope the Philippines can lead the way. You know, the last thing I'll say is, as we see the global north being attacked by the same, and let's call it the virus of lies, right? Being attacked because technically the United States, Silicon Valley, unleashed this. Mark Zuckerberg said, you know, move fast, break things. He broke democracy. And now we have to claw it back. And as you see in the book, what I say is that do not voluntarily give up your rights, because clawing it back later is so much harder. I still don't have the right to travel, right? But I'll tell you two things that you must do immediately, right? The first is the community that you've built, right? This community, move it into the physical world. This is how Rappler survived. When we were under intense attack online and I had 11 criminal charges against me, we moved to our community. And our community supported us. You know, it's funny, they supported us not just morally and emotionally, but they also crowdfunded. And every time I got an arrest warrant, we'd get a spike of crowdfunding. And while my sales team celebrated, I kept saying this is not a sustainable business model. So that's the first, build community. The second, demand public interest technology. And I will, from Germany and Norway, right? What is a public interest tech stack? It's something we built in the Philippines and rolled out for our midterm elections last May. German government websites are on the Matrix protocol, the same way with France. Countries that care about data privacy, they put it on the Matrix protocol. For Filipinos, we built the Matrix protocol chat app, where we have not just Rappler now, but Sunstar Cebu, the Daily Guardian, the Philippine Press Institute. We are federating news organizations so that we can talk to each other without big tech manipulating us for profit or commodifying our data, right? So the second is tech. And finally, the last one. If the trends continue, small and medium-sized news organizations will die within the year. Let me say that one more time. Journalism is necessary to hold power to account. And the business model is dead, and the way big tech is choking traffic to every news site around the world, and the way generative AI is literally stealing our content with impunity, small and medium-sized groups will die and corporate interests will reign. You do not want this world to happen. We're fighting and working against that.
Jens, not only Maria is speaking in front of the UN, also Russian government officials are. And when they go there, they will say the West is unjust, we are leading the way into a multipolar, more just way, and we are actually like fighting this double standard regime. Now, is that all propaganda? Or is also partially self-criticism necessary? Because when you look at German media writing the first articles about your book, there's the transponder thing about Russian fighter jets flying over the Baltic, switching off their transponder. You criticized that and then found out that NATO jets actually also do that. So this is a very small-scale example, but in general, this narrative about like the West with the wars in Iraq or the withdrawal from Afghanistan, how much self-criticism is necessary also in the times of propaganda and disinformation?
No, again, as I said, I believe in openness, I believe in transparency, and I believe that in this book about those 10 years in NATO, it is my obligation to also describe, well, the mistakes we made. NATO is not perfect. NATO allies are not perfect. And of course, we had our doubts, we had our dilemmas, we had our disagreements, and we didn't always made the right decisions. No institution, no organization will ever do that. And I think that in the long run, we build trust by being open and transparent also about what we did wrong. And therefore you can read about all that in the book. And on that transponder issue, transponder is something we have in planes to identify the planes. And state-owned planes, meaning warplanes, they often turn them off. And I criticize the Russians very heavily for turning off the transponders on their planes, and then suddenly someone told me that we actually do it ourselves. That was not the proudest moment in my political life, but I described that there. But I think we need to distinguish between a couple of things, because the strength with democracies is that it's not that we never make mistakes. Of course we make mistakes, but we correct mistakes. Because we have criticism, we have democracy, we change the leaders, we have the institutions that checks and balances. So that's the system that moves in a direction which is sustainable and in the long run moves in the good direction because it's decided by the people. The problem with authoritarian regimes is that they don't correct mistakes. They don't have criticism. They don't have the open, transparent debate that develops a better policy and a better answer to all the difficult questions. So that's point one. We need to, stand up for democracies. And this is just a theory, but you know, President Putin, he can conduct the war against Ukraine because he is an authoritarian leader. I mean, his message was that he believed when he invaded Ukraine that he was able to take control over Kiev within days and the rest of Ukraine within weeks. He has now been fighting for 3.5, soon 4 years. The casualty rate is around 1 million killed and wounded. They pay a very high price in casualties, economic price, for the Russian people. And they have gained, minor parts of Ukrainian territory for a very, very high price. So the reality is that this is a big strategic defeat for him. He has not been able to control Ukraine. After actually 12 years of war, he went into Crimea in 2014. He has 11 years. He has still not been able to take control over Donbass. And he wanted less NATO. That was the aim. Ukraine is closer to NATO now than ever before. And Finland and Sweden, who was never thinking about joining NATO, they're now members of NATO because of that invasion. So it has been a big strategic defeat. He wanted less NATO, he's getting more NATO. He wanted to win, he has not yet won, and he does not control even Donbass. In a democracy, that wouldn't have been possible. So, yeah. So again, yes, I'm honest about the dilemmas, and one of the big dilemmas, and I think it's a bit strange that we have almost forgotten Afghanistan. Afghanistan was the longest war of NATO ever. We lost thousands of soldiers there, including soldiers from Germany. We went into Afghanistan to fight international terrorism. And I was prime minister back in 2001 in Norway, and I was part of that decision to send in Norwegian troops. And I believe that was the right thing, and I describe in the book why I believe it was the right thing, because I had to fight Taliban as we actually went in and fought Daesh. We succeeded in defeating ISIS in Daesh in Iraq and Syria. We thought we had succeeded in defeating the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda people in Afghanistan. But I realized that after all these years, we didn't have the will, we were not willing to pay the price for staying there. So I gradually realized that it was wrong to stay. And this is about the democracy, because there were a lot of people in Afghanistan that believed in democracy, journalism, freedom of speech, a lot of women who believed in equal rights for men and women, and I told them, we will stay. They begged me, NATO, you must not leave. And I said, we will stay. But then after some years, I realized that it was a too high price to pay, that democracy was not willing to fight that war, and therefore we left. I think it was the right thing, but it was a big defeat, and now there are thousands or millions of people in Afghanistan who live under the Taliban regime and really felt that we betrayed them by leaving Afghanistan. So this is not a proud history, this is a bad story. But it's told in the book because I think it's good to be honest also about the mistakes we made, and that was a big mistake.
It's really a pity that we can't continue for another hour. So let me ask you two the final question, as you both, I think you've even mentioned it, or you too, you consider yourselves as optimists. What gives you optimism for the future? What can you share with the audience as optimistic view for this future, where, for example, in Europe, many people fear even a bigger war than the one in Ukraine now? Yeah. Who wants to start?
Minister,
no,
first.
I can start because I'm optimist for at least two reasons. One is that if you look at the big picture, many things have moved in the right direction. There are less people living in poverty now than ever before. There are more people living with some kind of minimum living standard than ever before. Life expectancy continues to increase. Child mortality is going down. So on those fundamentals, actually, things are slowly moving in the right direction. And we have to not forget that if you are able to make sure that your child survives, that's a huge, demonstration of progress, and we have child mortality has never been as low as it is today globally. So that's a reason to be optimistic that some big trends are moving in the right direction. I say that knowing that climate change is moving in the wrong direction. We have a full-scale war in Ukraine. We have had a brutal war in Gaza. But more people live in some kind of dignity than ever before in the globe. Second, I'm optimist because I'm a politician. Yeah, because
In their country,
well, if you don't think you can make the world a better place, then you can just sit down and give up.
Yeah.
And, and just imagine if the people before us had done that. I mean, my parents and my grandparents, they lived two world wars in Europe. But they were still optimists. And they created a much better society, for me. So what right have I to say now it's so difficult, I have the cell phones and the tech companies and everything is bad? Well, technology is dangerous. And technology can do a lot of harm, but technology can also be used by men to do a lot of good things. So let's use technology to make the world a better place and believe in progress, and it has worked before, it can work again. Yeah.
So maybe I should have let him speak last, because I'm somewhere in between. For me, hope comes from action. And literally, you've seen we keep moving, but the impunity must stop. That impunity, and that falls in the hands of many governments, right? But it also falls in the hands of people. So let me give two optimistic notes from the UN General Assembly. It's the 80th anniversary, and I was like thinking, I co-chair the Internet Governance Forum, and I kept thinking, it's not doing enough, it's not doing enough. But here was the hope for me at the UN. Multilateral movements that's led by the Global South. Right? This was Democracia Siempre, 20 countries that came together to protect information integrity. This is Brazil, Chile, Spain, 20 countries. I hope the Philippines is part of it. But protect information integrity, the second to push sustainable development and democratic institutions. So those three. Hand in hand with that, we rolled out AI red lines. That no one in the United Nations, every country now is supporting it, including China. So we all agree AI needs red lines. Now we need to push that further. What does that mean? And then I'll end. So that's at the UN multilateral. I still think so much has to be done to stop the impunity of war, the people going to war, the people manipulating us for profit. But the last one is this, right? And it's a question I ask in How to Stand Up to a Dictator. What are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? Because fortunately or unfortunately, those are the times we live in. And this moment, a decade from now, we're going to look at it and we're going to tell our kids, or we're going to ask ourselves, did we do enough? So I started with hope comes from action. Last year, with 74 elections, I spoke more than 100 times, many to kids. This year, I am hitting a city a day. Hope comes from action. Know that you are being manipulated. Protect yourself, demand better, and organize your communities to protect your rights. Democracy is fragile, and we need leaders like the minister. We need to elect them, right? So how do we do that? And we must do it together. This is it. Last 2 minutes of the basketball game for the Pinoys. This is it. Let's do it.
Maria, I believe you're speaking again up here tomorrow, no?
Yes, with Filipino journalists, young ones. I get to terrorize them. No, they will terrorize me.
And you have already been signing books back there. Jens Stoltenberg will be signing books just now afterwards here at the center stage signing area. Thank you two so much for being here, for sharing this optimistic message at the end with us. Enjoy the rest of your time here, and thank you all for being here, Maria Ressa and Jens Stoltenberg.